How we doing, folks? Let's take a closer look at the beginnings of this chapter 18, bacteria and viruses, and we will start with viruses. Notice that it says viruses. It doesn't say bacteria and viruses because, well, they're different, quite a lot different, actually. Um, let's see. Viruses make you sick differently than bacteria can. They are treated and prevented differently than bacteria are. But ultimately, they're just different. And let's take a closer look at how and why. So, what exactly is a virus? Well, if you've had the flu, if you've had a cold, have you heard about chickenpox or mono, mumps, measles, rubella, shingles, HPV, HIV/AIDS? This is a list of diseases that are caused by viruses. Um, at any rate, they're tiny. They're very small. Aside from the fact that they cause very specific diseases, like I was saying before, they're also just made differently than things like bacteria are. So as you can see here, it says that viruses are composed of nucleic acids. Okay, we're talking about DNA or RNA, enclosed in a protein coat and are smaller than the smallest bacterium. What exactly do we mean? Well, here's a little size comparison. Take a look at this little guy right here. That's a virus, believe it or not. It looks like a little moon lander, but that's a virus. This is a bacteria cell. Bacteria cells, keep in mind, are incredibly tiny compared to one of our cells. Here's just a piece of one of our cells. And as you can tell, it's ginormous compared to a bacteria cell. And the virus then is even smaller. So size comparison wise, viruses super tiny. So now let's talk about some properties of viruses. It seems that viruses are they were a little bit hard to pin down at first because they do certain things that are representative of living things, but a lot of characteristics of living things they don't share. So they don't carry out respiration. They don't grow. They don't develop. They do replicate, right? They do make more of themselves, but, and this is the big but, they cannot replicate without the help of us as of living cells. In this case, we call those living cells a host cell. It needs a host cell to do its thing, to make more of itself. Without a host cell, it just sits there and doesn't do anything. It is not viable. Okay, so you look a little bit more at okay. So how do we name these things? Well, sometimes they're named after the diseases that they cause, such as the rabies virus or the polio virus. You know, they cause rabies, they cause polio. Sometimes they are named for the organ or tissue they infect. For example, something, maybe we talked about this in class at one point, something called the rhinovirus, right? And you think, well, I don't really, what the heck is the rhinovirus? Well, you know what the rhinovirus is because it's the common cold. Rhino is a prefix that means nose. And so it makes sense that a virus that really kind of attacks the tissue in the nose, the sinuses, would be called the rhinovirus or otherwise the common cold. It says today most viruses are given a genus name ending in the word virus and a species name. This is just trying to get more specific. We just wrapped up a chapter on classification. We talked about the power of using, kind of universal language in classifying things, and it kind of avoids confusion. So this is kind of the direction we've gone. This last little bullet up here, this thing about the bacteriophage, believe it or not, viruses also attack bacteria cells, not just human and plant cells, right? But they attack bacteria cells. In fact, you've already seen a picture of a virus that attacks bacteria cells, and we're going to come back to that in just a second. Let's talk about how they're put together, right? Their structure. So they're incredibly simple things, but here is the nitty gritty. It says there a virus has an inner core of nucleic acid. That could be DNA or RNA, and it's sitting there right smack dab in the center. This is kind of cut away so that you can see what's going on inside. Looks a little bit like spaghetti. those are that's the nucleic acid. That could be the DNA, that could be the RNA. All right. This then is protected. It needs to be protected because otherwise it would kind of just disintegrate. It wouldn't hold up under uh, the conditions that a virus is going to be put through. So there is what we call a capsid around that nucleic acid. So that's the genetic information that the virus needs, and this is the protective coating called a capsid. Some viruses then also have what we call an envelope that surrounds even the capsid, makes it even tougher, right? Okay, so says some relatively large viruses, such as human flu viruses, may have an additional layer. We just mentioned this, called an envelope surrounding the capsids, but we left one thing out. You see these little kind of round, bulbous kind of projections. These things that stick out from the envelope, these are really, really important. Okay, we're going to get to these in just a second, but I just didn't want you to kind of overlook those. The way that viruses infect a cell is they have to attach to it. It's kind of like, have you ever been walking in the woods? You go for a hike. You finish up the hike, you get back to your car or you get back to your house or whatever, and you look down at your socks and you see those little burrs that are stuck to your socks. By the way, that was kind of the inspiration for Velcro. But aside from that, those little burrs, they've attached to your sock. And viruses do something in a very similar fashion. They will attach to your cells, specific cells, because these little guys, these, in this case, they're little purple things, right? They are different shapes and sizes depending on the virus. And because of their different shape or size, they will attach to different types of cells, either in humans or in other animals or in plants. They are very, very specific. It's almost like a lock and key situation, and biology uses this lock and key scenario an awful lot, where things have to be very specific and fit together very, in a particular way in order to work. Here's another virus. Viruses come in all shapes and sizes. I mean, they're all small, but they come in different shapes depending on what they have. The capsid is put together and that kind of thing. But the capsid is always going to be protecting that nucleic acid. The arrangement of proteins in the capsid of a virus determines the virus's shape. Just talked about that. Here's where it kind of gets interesting, I think. We just talked about how a virus, before it can replicate, it must enter a host cell. So this is where it has to attach, okay? And here is that virus that I told you about before that attacks specifically bacteria cells. This is called a T4 bacteriophage, okay? It looks like some sort of strange, crazy, it actually looks a lot like the lunar lander to me in some respects. Notice those spider legs, they're called tail fibers here, right? These little guys, these are the things that are going to attach to the cell itself that it's trying to use as a host. So it's going to land on the host cell. It's going to attach with those tail fibers, those little legs, okay? And that's what it's going to use to hold on to the cell, at which point then it will inject its nucleic acid into the host cell. And that's where the fun begins, as you might say. All right, so each virus has a specifically shaped attachment protein. Therefore, each virus can usually attach to only a few kinds of cells. We mentioned this before, but this is why a common cold, the rhinovirus, it has certain attachment points that only are good or only attached to cells that are found in the tissues in your nose, your sinuses. There are other types of viruses that attack other types of cells, specifically like maybe cells in your liver or cells in your lungs. And the list goes on and on. But the point is that they are very specific in what they attach to. So here is what we're currently dealing with. This is the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. This is the actual name of the virus that is at the center of this craziness right now. Okay, this is what it looks like. We mentioned this a little bit in class. It is called a coronavirus, and this is just one of many, many different types of viruses that have a similar shape and look. Okay, This particular one is causing the specific COVID-19, the disease that we are all concerned about. But the coronavirus is a general category of viruses. It's named after it's corona, right? And the corona means wreath or crown. And the first scientists that looked at these viruses, not specifically this virus, but coronaviruses in general, they saw, and keep in mind they had electron microscopes that weren't quite as fantastic as they are today, but they saw a virus with this kind of like this halo around it, which happens to be these spikes, right? That stick out, these little red things that stick out. These are the things that are used to attach to the host cell. And when they saw that, they thought, oh, that looks kind of like the halo, like the corona of the sun. So that's where the name came from. All right, so here is where we get into the important stuff. We've talked about what viruses are all about. Are they living or are they dead? Well, neither really, but they're more non-living than living. They're really small. We've talked about their shape, their size, how they're put together, and now we're going to talk about how do they actually make us sick. So there are two different ways. There are two different replication cycles that viruses can use to make more of themselves. We're going to pay attention to, well, let's start with the simpler of the two. And I'm kind of rolling through these slides right now. I probably should have taken these out a little bit earlier, but we're going to pay attention first to the lytic cycle. Okay, lytic cycle, I mean, this is what the coronavirus is. The coronavirus is the lytic cycle. A lytic cycle is probably best described by once you are exposed to the virus, it is only a matter of maybe hours, days, or a short number of days before you are actually sick from the virus. It's a pretty quick turnaround time. There isn't a very long incubation period. Okay, so you're infected, and boom, you can become symptomatic shortly thereafter. So how exactly does this work? Unfortunately, I'd rather have this diagram kind of laid out piece by piece and reveal it to you that way, but you get to see the whole puzzle all at once. Let's start with A, attachment. We're going to use a bacteria cell as the host because, quite frankly, it's just a lot easier to understand than an animal cell. Bacteriophage lands on the bacteria cell. It attaches using those tail fibers. And once it attaches, then it begins to inject its nucleic acid into the host cell. Okay? So that's why this is called attachment. Once it's injected its nucleic acid into the host cell, this is now the second step. We call this entry. This is where things really start to happen for both the virus and, unfortunately, the host cell. Because at this point, what is going on is the viral nucleic acid basically comes in and it sets up shop and it says, I don't care what you were doing before, you're going to stop, and now you're working for me. So all the things that the bacteria cell or the host cell in general, all the things that those cells have in place to run, to continue living, to make more of themselves, all those little processes, they stop working for themselves and they begin working for the virus itself. And what does the virus do? It says, okay, as long as you're working for me, what you're going to do is you're going to make more of me. And so that's the third step, replication. The host's metabolic machinery. Everything that it has at its disposal is now turned into basically an assembly plant for making more virus particles. Then we get to the actual assembly step, right? So first, everything is replicated. All those parts and pieces are made, and now they're all put together. Again, thank you very much, host cell. That's what's doing all the work for it. And the final step, step E, as a big old thank you to the host cell, this is now called lysis and release. This is where all these brand new viral particles, right? These new viruses, fully assembled, they break out of the host cell. And in doing so, they kill the host cell. Like I said, this is the big thank you. The host cell breaks open and releases new virus particles. So imagine one virus infecting one cell, and in the process, being able to produce or replicate hundreds, if not thousands, of new copies of itself. At which point it breaks open from the host cell, killing the host cell, and all those new viruses go in search of new hosts. And this is how it spreads throughout your body and from cell to cell. It is, as we've talked about before, an exponential growth. And it also begins to make sense as to why in these cases it doesn't take long between the time that you are exposed to a virus and the time that you are sick, because that virus is incredibly efficient at doing what it does. All right, so this is the lytic cycle. Oh, by the way, let me go back for a second. Lytic cycle, where does it get its name? It gets its name from the very last step, lysis. Lysis is to rupture, right? To rupture the cell. Lysis or lytic, I guess you could call it lytic cycle, kind of make more sense, but nonetheless, it's the big thank you. So now we talk about the second version of the replication cycle. We're going to kind of skip through this. This is called the lysogenic cycle. So the lysogenic cycle is admittedly, well, you're going to see that it looks a bit similar in a lot of ways, but here's the biggest difference. A lysogenic virus, a virus that uses the lysogenic cycle, can infect somebody, and then you have no idea that it's there. Maybe for days, weeks, months, perhaps even years. Because what it can do is it can lie dormant within your cells. And at some point in time, it decides to turn on, and when it does, that's when that person can become sick. So let's take a look at another diagram here. I should have just probably cut out the fat here and gone straight to this. Let's go back to the very beginning. This should look familiar. Attachment and entry, right? Boom. We're still using the bacteria cells as an example because it's easier. But here's the biggest difference. Look at what happens. Once things are attached and the nucleic acid enters the host cell, instead of immediately going into into full force, I'm the boss here kind of situation, all it does is it snips the host nucleic acid open and it inserts itself. And you can see this right here. It's called a provirus. This is the viral nucleic acid. It has now incorporated itself into the host nucleic acid. What does it do? Nothing. It does nothing. It just sits there. The host cell has no idea that it's there. And so it goes on about its normal life. It does its normal stuff. Eventually it divides. It goes through mitosis, right? Because that's what cells do. And every time it divides, every time it goes through mitosis, it copies the provirus. So as you can imagine, if this goes on for a long enough period of time, that one cell that was initially infected by the virus becomes 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on and so forth. Again, it's an exponential growth, but not in a way that makes you sick. Not at this point, because it's dormant, it's quiet, it's sleeping. Whatever you want to say, but it's not making you sick. It's just being copied along with the rest of the machinery and the rest of the nucleic acid in the host cell. But at some point, all of those cells that are infected, the provirus switches on. Scientists aren't quite sure how they do this in coordination. They aren't sure exactly what the cause is. Like, what's the trigger? Could be stress for the host cell. Could be, and that stress could come in the form of literally stress. Could come in the form of lack of nutrition, lack of sleep, those kinds of things. Have you ever noticed that you tend to, I don't know if you ever have had a canker sore or, like a cold sore, right? But once you've had them, you will continue to have them. And they're not there all the time. They come and they go. Why? Because it is caused by a virus that uses the lysogenic cycle. And every so often, when you get stressed out, that lysogenic cycle kicks into the lytic cycle, and then boom, you got a cold sore because now it kicks in and it does its thing, right? Have you ever noticed that if you do get cold sores, that oftentimes when you are stressed, when you're not getting enough sleep, maybe when you're sick from other things, when your body's kind of fighting off some things, that's when you might get a cold sore. Also happens during exam time when people are staying up too late. They're nervous. They're anxious. Their immune system's all funky and out of whack. Boom. That's when those cold sores are most likely to rear their ugly head. So, this is just one example. Another example, and you guys really don't have to deal with this, but chickenpox is another example. You guys have all had the vaccine, I think, for chickenpox, but people my age, we just got chickenpox. And so now that I've had chickenpox, and at some point I am susceptible to getting chickenpox all over again. But the second time around, the virus actually doesn't cause chickenpox for a second time, but it does cause something that you've probably heard of called shingles, right? This is something that happens in adults, most likely. And it's just the same virus that causes chickenpox initially, but it just has been there the whole time. And it goes through the lysogenic cycle and boom, eventually decides to reactivate and make you sick. So, at any rate, I wanted to share these two cycles with you. Yeah. So it says 3 examples of these viruses are herpes simplex 1, herpes simplex 2, that causes genital herpes, and the hepatitis B virus that causes hepatitis B. So if you're wondering, oh my God, herpes, yeah, if you've ever had cold sores, canker sores, well, you've got herpes. It's not the same kind of herpes, but it is a form of herpes. It's another virus. It's a different type of herpes virus, but nonetheless, that's viruses in a nutshell. So I want you to, kind of just take into consideration, we got viruses very, very different from bacteria. That's the bottom line. And we're going to talk more about that another time. Okay?